Now, the presence of oxygen is the absence of disease. So we need oxygen. The presence of oxygen is the absence of disease and also dis-ease. So when we shallow breathe, we are more uneasy.
Well, Sam Adams, it's so lovely to have you on the podcast. Thank you for giving us some of your time today. I thought we could start maybe a bit telling us about your personal journey, like into what you're doing now, which is, lots of very, very interesting. I want to talk a lot about the breathwork stuff because that's something that really interests us personally as well as like for our listeners. But yeah, tell us a bit about your personal journey.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thanks, Giles and Sophie, for having me. This has been a while coming, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So nice to finally get it done. Yeah, breathwork it's my passion, really. I guess the journey to getting here, um, I don't know how much you want really, but in terms of professional journey, I was in property for about 20 odd years, which is completely remote or removed from what I'm doing now, but it actually is part of the journey. I became a mentor around property investing and how to get into it because I was doing quite well. And so what I found through that was obviously I was dealing with a lot of people who wanted to build a business, and business is always personal, right? So what I found was that I was really enjoying the personal side of it, helping people develop themselves and also helping them have an understanding that they had to grow as a human on a personal level in order to have a successful business. So after a period of time, I really wasn't enjoying teaching the strategies around property because most people just want you to do it for them. This is my experience. But I love the personal side. So that sort of, my mind sort of shifted to, you know, thinking about coaching. I was massively into personal development. My first business that I had in around 1999, that's when I really sort of got into personal development and philosophy and reading about it, listening about it, couldn't get enough of it. And I had quite a difficult journey, like a lot of us. I've got my own story. I mean, I'm pretty sure I can speak fairly freely on this podcast.
Please do, yeah.
Yeah, I was sexually abused as a child, so I had all of that. And I grew up, we were the only black family in a white community. I was born in Dorchester in Dorset. That had its own challenges. So I had a lot going on as a kid. And I struggled as a kid. I was quite aggressive. I was quite mixed up, very confused into my sort of late teens, early 20s. So I had a lot of, I started therapy in my early 20s. I was very lucky. I had a very supportive GP. Then my sexuality came up. So I had all of that. So there's a lot of stuff there. So my whole personal development journey really started then. So I'd been into it. But then when I got into business, I really got into it. And that started that whole journey. So then, yeah, I wanted to be a coach. I didn't think I was good enough. I didn't think I could do it. But eventually I bit the bullet, got into life coach, and I started to step back from the property stuff. I had a couple of property deals go majorly wrong as well. I lost 100 grand on one deal. Literally, yeah, that's really having the rug pulled out from under you overnight. So I had some challenges with that. So I decided I got into the coaching really. Which I loved, absolutely loved. Always felt like I wasn't good enough, but I loved it. Met some really great people. And then in 2019, I was living in Spain and backwards and forwards to the UK, and my marriage broke down. And my dad was unwell with cancer, and then my dog became unwell. So in a very short space of time, going into 2020, I was getting divorced. My dad died. My dad sadly passed away, and my dog died suddenly. So in a really sort of few months. So it was a lot, and my divorce wasn't the cleanest either. So it was a really tricky time for me. And despite all the work I'd been doing, so I've been in coaching for a while. I had a lot of great people around me, healers and coaches. I just always felt like it was just something wasn't quite right, and I really struggled with the grief and the level of loss. And I grew up in an environment which was there wasn't a lot of emotional warmth, I guess. My parents are great, don't get me wrong. I love, and my mum's still alive and I love her dearly, but there wasn't the I love yous, the cuddles, the tucking in the bed at night. You're doing great. I'm proud of you. None of that. Don't cry. What are you crying for? None of that. So I didn't learn to cry. I didn't learn, any of those those skills, I guess, those emotional skills. So I think that really came up a lot in 2020. And I was in at a very, very low point in my life. The worst point, I would say. Um, and breathwork just kept coming across, something, the universe just keeps nudging you with something.
Mm.
I'd read about it, or I'd see it on Instagram, or someone would mention it. And I just thought, so I started to look into it a little bit. And then I thought, well, this is weird, but what have I got to lose? Like, I'm at the edge of everything. I was having therapy. It was kind of helping a bit, but it really wasn't helping me let go. So I bit the bullet and I went and did this 5-day emotional detox course, which was around conscious collective breath work. There was a lot of letter writing involved in it as well. And it was it was very experiential, but it most profound thing that I'd ever done in personal development in my life. Like, by the end of the 5 days, I was just like, what the fuck is that? Like, I just literally, and literally since that point to now, it's like 5 years, I've probably cried more in the last 5 years than I did in my entire life before that. And I started to write poetry. I wrote letters to the people that, you've got these issues with, or you feel aggrieved from, or you don't get. I wrote letters to my parents that they were never going to get these letters, but I also wrote the responses back that I wanted. And kind of stuff like that throughout this whole 5-day process. So it was so profound that I then thought, well, actually, like, a lot of my clients could really benefit from this kind of work, because we're all carrying stuff. And so, I decided to just train to become a certified conscious connected breathwork facilitator. And then I've been on that journey ever since, really, of I've just become super passionate about the breath work, because there's so many. It's like anything, there's a spectrum, right? And there's a spectrum around breath work. The kind of conscious connected breath work is probably at the more extreme end. It's transformational. But then I started to work my way back and go back to the beginning around foundational breathing, functional breathing, how we breathe day to day. I'm a huge sports fan, so I got into it around the sports stuff. I'm now working with a football team around that. So there's been this whole journey in the last 5 years. And that's kind of like how I got there, really. It just has been, and it feels, I wrote about this yesterday, like, how people look for their purpose. Like, so many people are like looking for their purpose in life. And I think that's just a waste of time. Like, it finds you. Like, I feel like it found me. And it's just kind of evolved just through me leaning into my pain, really, which most people are scared to do. It's too raw, it's too real. But when we live from a suppressed life and we compartmentalize all of this stuff that we don't want to feel, we can't live a full life, because when we dampen down all of those kind of negative feelings that we don't want to feel, what you're forgetting is it actually dampens down all of the joy and the happiness as well. So we do have to open the box, and we do have to lean in. And I, thankfully I lent in, and I've found this wonderful, amazing tool that complements my work, benefits me every day. And I see pretty much every day of my life it having an impact like I don't see in coaching. Like, coaching is great and I love it, and I bring it into my work, and I call it life and breath. So life coaching, breath work. But when last night I ran a class for conscious connected breath work, and I just see it in the room. It's very experiential for the people that come, but I get that feedback. It's like medicine for me and medicine for them. And it feels like my purpose has found me.
So true.
I'll shut up now because I've talked.
No.
Oh, Sam, honestly, yes. Do you know what? Sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes when we're doing podcasts, I forget that we're actually hosting the podcast, and I think in my head I go to a place where I'm listening to a podcast, and then I'm like just sat there like, wow, yeah, it's so true. There's a lot to unpack there, and you've got such an incredible story, and you've obviously gone through your sort of rock bottom moments and stuff, which we hear about a lot when people are at their absolute lowest, and it seems to be like everything happens all at once, with all the losses and all the job losses and illnesses and financial all this stuff goes on all at once, and it forces us to sort of stop. And I think a lot of people experience this with lockdown and when, you know, COVID hit and people were losing their relationships and friendships and jobs and having to really actually feel the emotions instead of dulling it down. And I think what struck me is when you said I started writing poetry. And I thought that's really interesting that not only have the emotions come out, but the creativity as well. Because obviously we're both creatives, aren't we? And it's like, you know, we live that stuff. But a lot of people, they don't allow themselves to feel that.
No. And I would have always said that I'm not creative. And I know everyone has creativity. There's creativity in everything, really.
Yeah.
And I think it was probably, like, I went to school, I left, you know, school was difficult for me. As you know, I had a lot going on. And I left school with very little education, you know. And I always said I couldn't really write. And so, but I think the poetry thing was probably there. Like I used to write rhymes or make rhymes up, or I'd take a song and I can change the words. But in my head, like never anything written down. I might write the odd sort of rhyme for my sister on a birthday or one of my family on a birthday, but that was it. So, and I literally wrote hundreds of poems. Like, I'm not kidding.
Wow.
Like, and then I did a writing course, and it just brought out it just brought up everything. And it's sometimes when I write it, it's very cathartic. Like the breathwork is great and it's cathartic, but there was this other side to it that it was just like an added layer. And I think that a lot of the pain from my divorce and a lot of childhood pain, because I wrote some poems about, I call it the little girl in the white dress, because there's a little photo of me in black and white in a white dress, and I look at it and it's like, even now I can feel it. It's like that little kid was going through so much. And I wrote poems around that as well. So it really helped just bring out all of that stuck emotion and blockages around that pain from my childhood, but also, you know, my marriage breaking down and stuff like that. So one thing I found with breathwork is that it's a real opener, but not just an opener around emotions and stuff, but creativity and clarity. And I've got hundreds of emails from people, and I even got one this morning, which was so beautiful. I just read it to my partner. I was just like, oh my God, like every day I get stuff like this, and it just blows my mind. But it can just really just make you this open channel. But whatever's within you, whether that's a bit of creativity or whatever, clarity, you know, it just, you're the vessel, but the breath work is that tool that just opens up your creativity.
Giles, I feel like we need to start doing breath
I
work.
do. I was thinking that as well. Well, actually, just on that, let's talk a bit about the sort of technicalities of, like you said, you sort of went backwards. You did this quite intense breathwork course, but then you sort of figured out lots of other parts about breathwork and back to functional breathwork. Can you tell us a little bit about like going from like for functional breathing, like our daily breathing, which is like something that we just probably take for granted a lot of the time. I can imagine a lot of us don't breathe properly either. Going through to something more intense like the conscious connected breath work, which I'd love to hear more about that as well. But yeah, so just tell us a bit about, I mean, what we're doing wrong. I feel like we're not breathing properly.
Yeah, a lot of people don't breathe. And, you know, for me, I thought, you know, breath is automatic, right? You know, our subconscious brain, our mind is just running the show, and it's running our breathing as we sleep at night. And we don't think about it. We just think we're doing it correctly. And but of course, even you and I know that you two sitting there, you know, Sophie might be breathing at 15 breaths a minute. You might be breathing at 20. So, you know, that there's a problem there straight away. You know, most people, you know, what happens is we go through things in life, whether it's trauma or difficult situations or stress. And what happens is that then obviously is tapping into your nervous system. And when your nervous system is stimulated either parasympathetically or sympathetically, your breathing rate changes, your depth changes, the range changes. And so, you know, most people know that if you're a shallow breather, so that means you're breathing in your upper chest. This is not good for you. This is what we do when we're anxious and we're stressed, and we're in the sympathetic part of our nervous system, which is all about fight and flight. It's that, and your heart rate speeds up along with it. But we can get stuck in that state. So we might do it at times where we just have a little episode or something, and sometimes it can be for our benefit, right? I remember when someone jumped out on me, straight into sympathetic nervous system, I ran. Great, you need it in those situations, right? But you don't need it continually, day in, day out. That's very, that'll impact your immune system, that impacts your oxygen exchange, your gas exchange, which impacts your health. The presence of oxygen is the absence of disease. So we need oxygen. The presence of oxygen is the absence of disease, and also dis-ease. So when we shallow breathe, we are more uneasy. When we have low, slow, deep breaths, and it's slower, it's more controlled, there was more depth to it, we're using our diaphragm, then we are more at ease. We're more into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the pause, the calm, the relaxation side. So our emotions tap into our nervous system, and our nervous system, all this then taps into and changes our breathing. So all of this plays a part in how we breathe functionally day to day. Now, we should be breathing, and we don't have time to go into this podcast, but how you breathe as a child can change your face as well, how your teeth align, your shape of your jaw. So there is, there's a lot. I'm not the expert in this, by the way. My friend Jane Tarrant, it absolutely is. But it can change your face shape, your jaw shape, your teeth, everything.
Wow.
So when I see people breathing now, I'm sort of like, ooh, yeah, you've been breathing like that for a long time. We want to be breathing, just really basically, we want to be breathing nasally. Some of us breathe through our mouth. But nasal breathing is how we need to be breathing day to day. The nose is designed for us to breathe. And when we breathe through our nose, obviously a few things happen. The air gets humidified and warmed up, and it gets filtered before it enters your lungs. When you breathe through your mouth, none of that happens. So it doesn't get warmed up, it doesn't get filtered. So if you're, we obviously live in, there's quite a polluted environment we live in. So mouth breathing isn't going to protect you against anything. And a lot of people mouth breathe when they're stressed or when they're exercising and they're panting. So there's no protection there. And when you use your mouth to breathe, you also lose about 40% more moisture. So you'll get dehydrated. So a lot of people, if they go to bed at night and they sleep and they mouth breathe overnight, they wake up dry mouth. Also, what happens when you breathe in with your mouth at night, you're more likely to go to the toilet more as well, and you'll wake up with a dry mouth. But when you use your nose, I'd say it humidifies, it filters it, which we want before it hits our lungs. We take in about 20% more oxygen. Nitric oxide is formed in the nasal passages. This dilates and opens up our airways. So obviously that helps with the level of oxygen you're taking in. So this is the optimum way to breathe. Like you're both doing it now. You both got your mouth shut. You nasal breathe. That's absolutely how you want to do it. And you want to be doing that at night as well. I take my mouth at night to keep my mouth closed so that I nasal breathe. And when I don't do it or forget to do it, I'll wake up in the middle of the night. I take my mouth, have a deep sleep, and I just sleep so much better. I don't get up to go for a pee. So it's the optimum way to breathe. So if anything, that's the one thing people, hopefully take away is that, consciously start to pay attention to your breath day to day. Like when you're driving in the car and you're just, like we do, thinking, is your mouth open? Where can I feel my breath? Just start to notice, hand on your chest, hand on your belly. Is my belly moving more than my chest? If you're breathing in your upper chest, that means that you're only getting air into the top part of your lungs. And we want it right in the bottom of our lungs. So we have to use our diaphragm. And your diaphragm is the main muscle we use for respiration. I have to say that word right. So we need to, so it's just starting to notice how you're breathing by, like anything, as soon as we place some attention on it, and we have the awareness of it, and we can start to make some correction. And even me, I have to do it for myself still when I'm driving in the car, or I noticed when I was sat at my desk the other day that my mouth had dropped open. I was like, close your mouth. So functional breathing is super important because how like if you're into your sports, and obviously like I'm into my sports and athletics, and whether you do yoga or Pilates or whatever your thing is, how you breathe day to day is going to impact all of the other activities you do, and how you manage when you're stressed, emotional, when you go for a run, go for a swim, or when you come along and do transformational breathing. That's all in. That's why I started at the end. That's why you have to go back to the beginning, because how people show up and breathe day to day impacts how you breathe when you're stressed, when you're doing activity, and when you come along to do some transformational breath work. So, and it massively impacts your, like every cell in your body, every fissure in your body needs oxygenated blood. And so the transfer of gases is really important. And if you can slow your breathing down and nasal breathe, those two little things alone will massively help that. And that reduces the likelihood of you getting illnesses. It bolsters your immune system. I could talk about this stuff all day long, but those are just the very basics that you want to be thinking about. Just place some awareness. Is my mouth open? Am my mouth breathing? Because this is not good for me. It's dehydrating me. There's no filtration. There's no humidify. Your air's just getting in cold. You think about that for a minute. Like when we had COVID and we all wore a mask. If you're all day to day on a plane, there's no filtration here. Your nose is that barrier. Of course, it means you still might get a cold and stuff like that, but you're likely that you're better protected that way.
It's funny, my friend is a dentist, so she wears masks and PPE and stuff quite a lot. And we were talking about this recently. She is a mouth breather. Because of being a dentist, she almost like has learned to breathe through her mouth, because she doesn't want to smell anything unpleasant. Like when she's like hovering over people's faces all day, she doesn't want to like smell.
Have they not brushed their teeth? Disgraceful.
Well, apparently
I brush
not.
it extra when I go to the. It extra when I go to the dentist.
Same. I like before going to the dentist, I brush my teeth, I floss, I do the whole thing, and then I'm like, I always do this. Everyone. I thought everyone did that, but she was like, no, I find like dog hairs in people's mouths.
Oh,
God. Goodness
honestly,
me, gross.
Disgusting. But she's like sort of trained herself either consciously or subconsciously to breathe through her mouth. She says now everyone makes fun of her because they're like, oh, you're a mouth breather, like. And I would say like, you need to stop doing that because it's not good for you. But I didn't realize how bad it is.
Massive impactful, wasn't it?
Yeah. And go on, sorry.
No, I was just saying how impactful it was.
But yeah, it's like, I mean, first of all, thank you for sort of explaining how important it is just on a day-to-day basis, because I think when I think of breath work, I think of like Wim Hof or all of these sort of trendy things that people do nowadays, or you can go on YouTube and you can find a breath work video and stuff like that, but actually it's so important just on a day-to-day basis, to like check your breathing. And I find it even when I do yoga or something. I was saying the other day to my friend, like my posture is terrible, but when I'm in a place of like doing yoga every day, my posture is always great, because throughout the day I check in with myself and I'm like, oh no, straighten your back. And it sounds like it's the same with breath work. If you get into the habit of doing breath work more regularly, then perhaps you get more into the habit of checking yourself throughout the day.
Yeah, it's just that noticing, just starting to place some attention on it. Even if you just do that one breath a day, just to start to notice how you're breathing. If you think about it, like, I love like Wim Hof and all of that. They're great because they brought breathwork to the forefront. But when you think about breathing, most people don't place any attention on it. Like I didn't until, 2019, 2020. So, but, we can go without food for about, I don't know, quite a number of days. I remember even when my dad was dying, he didn't have food for about 2 weeks and he just kept living. And it's like you can live like 30, 40 days without food. You can probably go a few days without water, but you can't go more than a few minutes without your breath. Yet there is so much focus on what we eat and what we drink, diet. But where's the focus around breath? That one thing that we can't, that keeps us alive and that we can't do without for more than a few minutes. And so it's great that it's, there's more awareness around it. And it's something we do up to 25,000 times a day. So if you can make a tiny correction in your breathing style, that is going to have huge benefits for you, emotionally, mentally, and physically, your internal health, your mental health, because your breathing can regulate your thinking as well. And there's this whole loop that goes on between mind and body and thinking patterns. And, like I had a client yesterday, she's a massive overthinker. And I took her through coherent breathing yesterday. It's a technique you use at night. I just when you're overthinking, so it can really, your breath can really help you with your thinking as well. What we attach to, what we don't attach to, and really, the simplest thing about breath work or breathing is it just puts you in the moment. Like the minute you just go, "What's my breath doing?" You're present. This
Yeah.
is, everyone said, "Well, how do I be present?" And it's so simple. It's just like, okay, what's your breathing doing? Just maybe close your eyes if it helps, and just place a hand on your tummy and a hand on your chest. You don't even have to do that. And just like, oh yeah, my breathing's all in my mouth or it's all in my upper chest. And the minute you do that, you're present.
Yeah, I mean, it's the basis of most meditations is initially the breath work, isn't it? I think I probably need coherent breathing because I'm terrible overthinking,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'll have to talk to you about that later. But
Yeah, it's a beautiful one as well. I love it.
but yeah, tell us a bit about then the sort of more, I guess, the more intense breath work, the things like the conscious. You obviously talked about conscious connected breath work.
Yeah.
How does that kind of work? How do people come into doing something like that? Is that can anyone do that, or do you need to be at a certain point in your life? Is that is it accessible to anybody?
Majority of people, there's a few contraindications around health. So if you've had recent major surgery, maybe if you're pregnant, had retinal surgery, there's a list of about 10 contraindications. So epilepsy, severe mental health issues like schizophrenia and stuff like that. High blood pressure is on the list. Yeah, I have high blood pressure and I do breath work every day. So there's a lot of caution, I guess, around it. And I was trained by an American guy where there's super caution. So I put all of the, because Americans, I think they're going to get sued for everything. But there are some contraindications around health. But it can be pretty much for everybody. The people that come along to my classes, I guess, and my sessions, there's a wide variety. I think it's one of those things at the moment that people who I see come to my sessions are just going through transitions in their life. They might have tried a lot of other things and it's not worked, or they're not where they want to be, or they're feeling stuck. I've had quite a number of cancer patients come, people whose relationships are struggling, people who are going through grief, which is obviously how I found it around loss, but there's losses show up in many different ways in our lives, financial losses, relationship losses, and so on and so forth. People who are at crossroads with their careers, an abundance of things, really. I get a lot of therapists. I ran a workshop on Saturday for 15 people. One therapist came who had been to one of my short classes, and she came, but she brought 3 other therapists. Yeah, and there was 2 other therapists who didn't know it. So I had 5 therapists in on Saturday, and it tends to be a bit of a pattern. So there is a wide variety of people that come, but I think it's just people that want change. They want to feel something. They want to move through something. They might not always know what it is that needs shifting. And like my partner came to breathwork last night, and she is in a very good place in her life. I mean, she's got me, so it's like, but she loves breathwork, and she cried last night. She said, I don't know why I cried. Like, I'm all good. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't have to know. And that's the thing, right? You don't always have to know. You might have you might just rock up and just feel really good and do it and just have a bit of a cleanse. But you don't always have to know what it's about. It just it feels good, right? It feels good to cleanse. It feels good to have a good bubbly snot cry. It feels, good to just let go and let the breath take over and trust your breath. So I get a wide variety of people that come. And now I've started doing more private sessions. So I have a family that are grieving a divorce. So there's kids involved, and one of the parents has been coming to my classes for a long time, and now they want to bring the kids and come as a private session to help the kids heal. So that's something that's come about. And I think it's just people that are just on a bit of a well-being, personal development journey and want to try something different. So yeah, a very wide variety of people, really.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about, I know people have different beliefs about this, and we've spoken to people on this podcast who subscribe to similar sort of beliefs, but it feels like a lot of trauma and grief and emotion is sort of stored in the body on a level that we often don't even know it's there. And I speak from experience when I say, like, I've had big traumas in my life that I just never grieved, and I just went back to work the next day like nothing had happened, and everyone's like, is she okay? But it's in there, and it comes out in various different forms. And it sounds like this is sort of a great access point to kind of bring out stuff that's on a more subconscious level. So how would breath work, not necessarily this type of intensive breath work, but just breathwork sessions, how does that help us to sort of access the subconscious mind and bring out stuff within us, and help us to access also the nice stuff and the creativity and the emotion and stuff?
Yeah, it does have that, I think that it's becoming more well known that like conscious connected breathwork and other types of breathwork like this, like holotropic, rebirthing, which is pretty much conscious connected breathing, I think, to help with trauma and a lot of loss and grief. And generally, yeah, we do get a number of people that come along for that. So when we breathe in a conscious connected way, we breathe very differently. So I've just said to you, and is functional breathing, use your nose, keep your mouth shut, day in, day out. But when you come to conscious connected breath work, you use your mouth. So it's the complete opposite. And it's very active. You're changing the speed, the depth, the range. You're using your mouth. So what happens then is the homeostasis changes in the body, because obviously normally we're breathing in a certain way and certain levels of carbon dioxide are present, and that's pretty stable unless we have an emotional experience, and it might fluctuate a little bit and our breathing rate might change. But when we do conscious connected and we're actively breathing in this way, we're forcing ourselves to take a lot of air in through our mouths and we dump it out through our mouth as well. It's very different. And when we breathe this way, like I say, it changes the carbon dioxide levels. Let's say it changes the oxygen levels. I mean, your oxygenated blood is always between 95 and 100% pretty much anyway. But you're taking in more air and you're taking shorter exhales, so the carbon dioxide levels change. So most people think the stimulus to breathe is air. It's like if you was to hold your breath, think, God, I need to, after 20 seconds or whatever, I need to take in some air. It isn't the air. It's the buildup of carbon dioxide that's triggering your brain to say, I need to breathe. I need to take it. That's what's triggering you to breathe. So what we're doing is when we're forcing our air in and taking less exhales, the carbon dioxide changes, and this is what the body's reacting to. And you have a physical reaction to that. You have an emotional reaction to that. So I always say the three key areas is mentally, emotionally, and physically. This is what gets impacted. Some people sort of say cosmically and spiritually, and yes, those elements, but I talk about the three key areas. So when we breathe in this way, because all of that is changing, all of this is going on in the body, the brain then starts to go, the fuck's this? Why are we breathing like this? This feels uncomfortable. Stop. You start to feel lightheaded because you're changing that balance within your body. Tingling happens throughout the whole body. Temperature change can happen. Like I had someone come to class on Saturday, absolutely wringing wet. Shirt off, other people are cold, because everybody's body and breathing rate is different to start with. So it impacts people in very different ways. And so when we breathe in this way and we change all of this in how we're breathing, and change the homeostasis in our body, it can access the deeper parts of our brain and the subconscious brain. And as you know, the subconscious brain is like that filing cabinet for all of the old stored stuck stuff, the old memories from childhood and teenage years and all of the stuff that we're like, I don't want to think about that or look at that. It's there. So because we're changing how we breathe, it alters us. It can, not always, it can alter our states of consciousness. And so we can feel like we're not connected to our body. We can feel slightly out of our body. Lots of people describe it as, taking an E tablet to LSD. I'm high. I'm in this blissful state. I didn't feel my body. I felt like I wasn't in the room. Like on Saturday, someone said, how long was I breathing that active breathing for? I went 27 minutes. She went, God, it felt like 3. Completely not, she'd completely gone. Like, but in a beautiful way. It's not painful. It's not uncomfortable. It's the breath just does what it needs to do with the body and the tool. You're the tool for the breath to go, oh, right, okay, this is where it needs to go. This is what, this is your experience. Very individual, and it's very different every time you do it. The first 5 times first day I did it, I was like, I'm not coming back tomorrow. This is fucking weird. Like, because what the hell happened? And then the second day, I definitely, it felt like I tripped out. And I've never really done drugs or anything like that, so I don't know what that feels like. So I was like, that's the only way I could describe it. It was just like, I wasn't present. Like, I don't know where I was. And then I saw my dad, and my dad had not long died. But it wasn't a scary feeling. It was actually really calming. It felt really good. So these are the things that can happen. It doesn't happen for everybody. You can get very emotional. Like I say, you're going into that subconscious part of the brain, the stuff that we probably don't even know needs unsticking and debunking. And, like I say, you might get to the end of it. I don't know what that was, but it feels good. So yeah, that's what happens. Mentally, emotionally, and physically. It doesn't happen for everyone. It doesn't happen in the same degrees. I'm explaining the extremes. You can have a very physical reaction. Your body can twitch and move. I've had someone who, or even like Vivian, my partner, last night, she said, my hands felt like they were doing this. I see that a lot. Like, people feel like they're levitating because they feel like they're out of their body. But it's a beautiful thing. And one of the words I hear the most, and even in the email I got this morning, was bliss. That's probably one of the most common words that I get in emails and text message. I feel this sense of bliss.
Wow. And who wouldn't want that, really?
Exactly. I mean, don't get me wrong, everybody's different. At the weekend, I had somebody who knew that they came to the session at burnout. She said, like, work is, I get a lot of professionals come, doctors and vets and all sorts of accountant, all sorts of people. She's like, I know I'm at burnout. So she had a very deep, heavy experience, and that she left like that. Now, I don't just let people walk out the door and go, bye, thanks for coming, because that, I have higher standards than that. I keep connected to people because, yes, it can access deeper parts of your brain and your subconscious where we don't know. I don't know what everyone individuals got there. They might not even know. And so it can bring up a lot of past trauma that might be reignited. It might get triggered. So I have a duty of care to check in on everybody because they might need my support from a coaching point of view, but they might need therapeutic support. So I always make sure that I check in on people because it can stoke a bit of a fire sometimes and it can trigger people. But the majority have a really blissful experience. And testament to that is the therapist that came on Saturday who told me at the end of the first class, she said, a lot of my clients need this, and she works in mental health. And she brings 3 other therapists. Just come and experience this because I think this is good. This is going to be an experience you're going to want to have. And actually, we might be able to use it with our clients because it is great for people that have been through significant challenges in their life. The guy that taught me, who's been doing it for 30 years, he was a drug and alcohol addict. And that's how he found breathwork, and it changed his life. So there is a lot around trauma that it can help with, and really some of these more difficult things in life that we're going through, it can be hugely beneficial. But you need, like, I do conscious connected breathwork on my own, but I've been doing it for 5 years. I had to do it every day for a year when I first trained. But it's not something you just want to go and do yourself and try. You could do it. You could probably go online and find it on YouTube or anywhere. But I wouldn't recommend it. You need someone in that room holding that space. Because
I was going to say, sorry, there is something to be said for having a communal experience with something like that, isn't it? So you can support one another with it.
Absolutely. And that's, that was one thing I learned very early on when I was doing breathwork. And I was scared to do it in the beginning, to teach it, because it was just like, it felt really kooky and very weird. But one thing I really noticed was that I can't just walk away and just let these people come for an hour class and then like I say, bye. Like, it's, I couldn't leave them hanging like that. That's just, and I know that happens. but it's not happening on my watch. And as I've gone on with this work more and more, I've like, right, if you're going to come to my class, I have to be able to contact you the next day to check in on you, because like this, who knows what we're stoking here, who
Of
knows
course,
what we're unearthing here. And I noticed that very early on. So that's when I then started doing workshops, so that I have longer periods of time with people. And the more I've done it, even like at the weekend, we had 3.5 hours together, and someone said, I could have done with a half an hour more. And I used to do it for 3 hours, and I took it to 3.5 hours. Now I'm thinking I'm going to have to make it 4 hours. And she did mention that that community of being around people and having this experience together. And I love group breath work. When people are having that experience together, it's a really beautiful thing. Really, really beautiful thing.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be said about that sort of energy. So, you mentioned that woman there that kind of, she came to you at burnout, and a lot of people that find themselves at these rock bottoms and suffering from anxiety or depression and stuff like that. So for people to sort of help avoid getting to that point, is there certain breathwork things that people can do at home, like quite quick? Because we always talk about on the podcast time, like people listening, we give all of these tips of like, journaling and meditation and yoga and breathwork, and I just think, for me at least, and probably a lot of other people listening, it's just a time thing. Like it sounds like a lot to sit down and do something, even for like 20 minutes. Are there breathwork techniques that you can use on your day-to-day, 10, 15 minutes, to sit down and do a specific type of breathing to help you avoid getting to that burnout in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, burnout is just obviously a lot of overwhelm and a lot of overload combined. I think burnout is about, and that continual drive, and not taking those pauses and taking those breaks. And let's be honest, we live in a very overstimulated world, and success has been skewed, so there are, there's functional breathing, there's transformational breathing, and then there's this bit in the middle, which I call sort of like baby breath work, that you can do that can help you day to day. And you probably know a lot of these, like box breathing, 4-7-8 breathing, even coherent breathing. And these are smaller techniques that you can use throughout your day to day to just help you manage and regulate your emotions. I'm doing this stuff with a football team, and I've done it with athletes. And it's just to help you manage and regulate yourself. If you've got a constantly overstimulated nervous system and you're in a sympathetic state all the time, that is not healthy. That is absolutely going to batter the inside of your body mentally and physically. So you can use your breath for your emotional agility and your well-being. So, obviously I have some clients that have quite senior roles, and we use a lot of the smaller breathwork techniques to help them with that, like box breathing. So if you're going into, and we use it in football as well, so at half time, or as before they're going into a tricky match. So there was a big match the other week. It's like, right, they're going to box breathe together collectively, and it's going to be led by the captain. And box breathing is, I think Navy SEALs created box breathing. They definitely use it because it's going into intense situations, and they use it. And it's and you don't need to do it for 10 minutes. Like I've done it with a client who's got their first senior role, and they have to go into a boardroom, and they've never really experienced that before, and it's intimidating. So it's like, she's like, no, I'm really stressed, I'm anxious, like, and I'm like, how's your breathing? She's like, my rate's really. I said, right, before that session, make sure you block out 5 minutes, just go be by yourself and do box breathing. So I've taught her how to do box breathing, because box breathing it will just get into the parasympathetic, the pause, the calm side part of your nervous system. And you don't need to do it for a long period of time. You can do that for 2 or 3 minutes, and you will feel calmer going into that intense situation. So it's a very simple technique to use entering in stressful, like you might be going to need to have a conversation with your partner, and you're feeling a bit stressed and a bit anxious. Do a little bit of box breathing beforehand. And then there's things like 4-7-8 breathing, which was created by Dr. Andrew Weil, very well-known guy in this kind of space. And I use it for flying. Again, you don't need to do it for 5-10 minutes. I've always had a big fear of flying. I went to learn to fly, which massively helped with. I always lean into my stuff. See,
God, that sounds horrible.
So you hate flying?
I've got a huge fear of flying, and
To fly.
no way. Getting on a plane that doesn't have more than one engine, absolutely not. Those are the ones that crash.
So like, this is my because I wanted to travel the world, so it's like, how am I going to overcome this? So I thought I'm going to learn to fly, so that's what I did. But I didn't get my PPL, which is my license, so I still get a bit of anxiety, although I have a greater understanding of how you fly a plane and what goes on. So I use 4-7-8 breathing. And that's, you breathe in for 4, you hold for a count of 7, and you breathe out for a count of 8. So if in doubt, breathe it out. This is another really good tip for your listeners, is like, if in doubt about what breathwork technique you need to do, just extend your exhale. Because by extending your exhale, you're tapping into the parasympathetic, the calm, the ease, the rest. So just if in doubt, breathe it out. So that with 4-7-8, you're doubling the exhale for the length of the inhale. And you can always do that. There's a 1 to 2 breath as well, which is breathe in for 3, breathe out for 6. You're just doubling the exhale, which will just relax you and calm you. And these little techniques take 2 or 3 minutes. It's not about 10, 15, 20 minutes. You don't have to come along and do conscious connected breathwork for 45 minutes or an hour. You can use some of these smaller baby breathwork techniques that can really just help you in day-to-day life. Like I say, when I'm on a plane, if there's a bit of turbulence or whatever, or if just a little bit of anxiety creeps up in me, I always do 4-7-8 breathing. And it's super helpful. So it isn't about, it's great if you can have a practice of breath work. Like, I obviously have a practice of breath work. Am I perfect? No, because I'm not a robot. Some days I miss it. Last night I couldn't get to sleep, so I did breath work, and I just did coherent breathing. So coherent breathing is something you might want to do for a little bit longer. Super lovely to do at night, before you're going to sleep. 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. I can do it for 20 minutes. People can look up online on YouTube coherence breathing, because there's chimes. So what happens is, when you coherently breathe, you breathe in for the same amount as you breathe out, generally about 5.5 seconds, because that really is optimum. If you can breathe in for 5 seconds and breathe out for 5 seconds, that's a really beautiful pace. That's the kind of rate you want to be breathing at. We are not breathing at that. We are breathing way faster than that. So this is really great for your tolerance of carbon dioxide and getting you into a much slower, deeper breathing pattern. But what happens is, when you coherently breathe, it's super relaxing. It just stops the overthinking. Like, and I have a lot of overthinkers, because I deal with a lot of sort of leaders and people in sport, and it's intense. So if you're at that point like you, Giles, at night, just go to YouTube, tap in coherent breathing. You'll get some chimes. You don't have to count for 5 seconds. The chimes just come in for 5 seconds, then the gong goes. You do the opposite of what you're doing, and you just follow the chimes with your breath. You just follow the rhythm with your breath. And honestly, it's so soothing. But what you don't realize, you think, oh, this is great, it's helping me get sleep. But actually, you're building up your tolerance to carbon dioxide. You're starting to learn a slower breathing pattern. We want to be breathing slower, not faster. Most people think, oh God, do you get anxious? You don't need to breathe more, you need to breathe less. And this, if you had a regular practice of coherent breathing, oh my God, it would be so beneficial to you, your immune system, your exchange of gases, your body getting used to being in parasympathetic rather than sympathetic. But it's so beautiful just to help you stop you overthinking in the first place at night when you're going to sleep. So there's I've got thousands of these, there's hundreds of these that you could learn. Some, like I say, coherent, maybe used for a little bit longer, but box breathing, 4-7-8 breathing, 1 to 2 breathing, just deep diaphragmatic breathing, just focusing on, imagining that your diaphragm is expanding down and flattening out, and your belly's expanding. Just focusing on that will strengthen that diaphragmatic muscle. The diaphragm's a muscle. It needs strengthening, and most of us have never given it 1 ounce of attention. We go to the gym, we think, oh, biceps, triceps. What about your diaphragm? Are you working that out every day?
Yeah,
So
I was actually going to ask Sam. Sorry to interrupt, but when you were saying about doing breathing in for 5 seconds and breathing out for 5 seconds for coherent breathing, and I was thinking, God, if I try and breathe in for 5 seconds, I get to like 3, and it feels like my lungs are full. Is that because I'm breathing in too much too soon, or is it because my diaphragm's not strong enough, or my lungs aren't big enough? What's going on there?
it's about that. Well, women have smaller lungs than men anyway, so there's that dynamic. Women definitely breathe different to men,
Okay.
and that's something I'm doing a little bit more research into because of sport and stuff. But it's just your mechanics of breathing. Well, it's not just that. It can be many things that are a factor of that. You might have learned this pattern of breathing, so your tolerance to carbon dioxide isn't as great as maybe Giles or someone else. But I think in society today, we are overbreathers. An overbreather means that you're only breathing in for 3 seconds rather than 5 seconds. If you're only breathing for 3 seconds and Giles is breathing for 5, that means you're breathing way more in a minute than Giles is. So your tolerance to carbon dioxide isn't built up. Your diaphragm probably hasn't been strengthened, and your ribs have to expand as well. So if you're breathing in your upper chest, your ribs aren't expanding enough. We want our rib cage to expand when we breathe in. This is why we need to use our diaphragm. Your diaphragm sits under your rib cage, and then if you're using your diaphragm and it's strong, it will push down and your rib cage expands out. But if your diaphragm's not strong, it can't do that. You're going to go for 3 seconds and it's tight and it can't go any further. Therefore, your rib cage can't expand. Therefore, your lungs can't get full.
Okay,
So
that
you've got
makes
to work
sense.
and it's the tolerance to carbon dioxide as well, which takes time to build up. And there's many techniques that you can do that. Breath hold techniques, which we use as altitude training in sport. And there's lots of exercises that you can do to start to strengthen that diaphragm, but also to build up your tolerance to carbon dioxide, which will give you this ability to breathe deeper, slower. So it's slow and deep.
Yeah.
Not you're taking too much.
Because you do get that panic, don't you? That like, oh, I need to take my breath. And I also wondered if it's
Sorry, there's a big psychological part to carbon dioxide as well, but
right. Yeah, I wondered if, because just completely off topic, but I went to Quito a few years back, which is one of the highest altitude cities in the world. It's like the capital of Ecuador, and everyone reacted really differently to the altitude. Some people felt like altitude sickness, some people felt nothing. And I wonder as well if that's got anything to do with the CO2 tolerance.
It will be 100%. I had a friend who's climbing a mountain, and you can simulate altitude training by doing breath holds.
Oh, wow.
But that needs to be done in a controlled environment with somebody who knows what they're doing. But he came to me and he's like, I'm doing this mountain climb. Can you help me? I'm like, absolutely. So it is about carbon dioxide.
And
Like, if you're an overbreather day in, day out, and you're like, maybe you can only breathe 2.5 seconds in before you're on to your exhale, you've got a low tolerance to carbon dioxide, you are going to be shit on that mountain.
And what about diving? So they are the opposite. Are divers get better at breath work? Are they worse?
Yeah, of course. Like, free divers, and that's another subject I want to really sort of, when you don't have enough time in the day to read all the things you want to read, like free diving, like how they hold their breath. Like, I want to know more about that, because of course they have to have a huge tolerance to carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide buildup must be massive, but what plays a big part of that is psychology as well. Because your brain is telling you, I need to breathe, I need to. So, like when I do breath holds, and I do breath holds because I'm building up my tolerance to carbon dioxide, which means for me, when it comes to athletic performance, I want to do more with less. This is why we build up our tolerance to it. I forgot my point. Hang on.
Divers.
Was it divers? Yeah. So a big part of it is like and this is why conscious connected breath work helps athletes, is because there's that mental strength.
Yes.
Because we talk about it a lot in conscious connected breath work. It's like, I always say to people, the first thing that's going to happen is your brain's going to try and tell you to stop. Don't stop. Keep going. You're totally safe. And what happens is if you do a breath hold now, you'll get to a few seconds and then your body will start reacting. You might get a twitch in your diaphragm in your throat. But what you're thinking, like your brain's going to go, I need to breathe. But then it's your job to then go, no, I'm safe. I can tolerate this. You've got to override that. So there's a big psychology part. That's the thing that's, you can hold it much longer, but you've got to override the psychology part first.
Yeah. I think Darren Brown on one of his shows did that sort of experiment where he got some girl to sort of hold her breath underwater, and she could only do it for a certain amount of time, and then did it again, but this time did like a bit of breath work and like really calmed the nervous system.
Yeah.
And she did it for so much longer than she ever thought she would be able to, because when you do breath holds, sometimes you are, because I've done a little bit of that in the past, and you're like, oh my God, that's like 2 minutes of not breathing. That's crazy. How did I not pass out or die?
Yeah, exactly. So your body's incredible, right? What it can do and what it can tolerate. But it's like anything, it's practice. You know, you've got to build up to it. It's a bit like taping your mouth at night. Like most people go, I can't do that. Or you've got to build up to it. Tape your mouth for 5 minutes when you're at your desk during the day. Build up to 25 minutes. When you can tolerate your mouth being taped for 25 minutes, then try and go through the night. Like, don't just dive straight into it. And it's the same with all of this stuff. It's like it's a muscle. You know, it's a mental muscle. Your diaphragm's a muscle, and you just have to build up to it. And the first place and starting point is just notice how you're breathing, and then go from there.
Yeah. Well, Sam, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. I've been a big kind of fan of breathwork and the power of breathwork. I think I've mentioned this on the pod before that years ago I had like a group therapy session for anxiety management. This was like 20 odd years ago. Yeah. And the group session wasn't particularly rewarding, but at the end of each session they did a breathwork.
Oh, cool.
And this is like 20 odd years ago, like, you know, and it was just to get us calm, like you say, getting into that our nervous systems and like making sure that we can just calm ourselves, and it's always stayed with me, some of those techniques that we were showing when I'm in those moments, just knowing to, you know, take a breath. There wasn't anything specific like 4-4 or the 4-7-8 one you were talking about, but just little techniques that were just enough for me to feel calm again. And it's always really stayed with me, the power of breath work and how much it can help us especially in those moments of fight or flight.
And I think, absolutely. For all of us, we're all going to have challenges and intense situations. And we all know, and you know, that emotional agility is crucial. You know, it impacts everything. If you can regulate yourself, if you have the really good self-regulation, we have more clarity, we make better decisions, we have better focus, better motivation. There's so many benefits to this. And it just starts with your breath. Because your breath, once you can, this is it's straight into the nervous system, which is what you need to regulate. So to be able to do that, the way you can do that is with this free tool of your breath. So just learning a couple of techniques like you learnt, Giles, all those years ago, you can regulate yourself. You can regulate yourself in different conversations with your partner. It's like, everyone goes, oh, take a breath, right? But what are they really saying? Like, oh, take a deep breath. Like, people don't really know what they're saying when they say that. But if you delved into that just a little bit, you'd understand what that's about and understand how crucial that is to help you benefit your life in a positive way on a daily basis.
And it's so great to also use alongside other sort of methodologies, you know, your toolkit, like you said, writing letters or journaling, or doing it when you're going for a walk in nature, or, you know,
you can breathe in, like some athletes do that. They breathe in alignment with how many steps they take. And in fact, when you do altitude training, you can walk around the room and do breath holds to your step count. So you try and hold your breath to begin with for 15 steps, and then you try and build up, and you want to build up to about 80, 90, 100 steps of holding your breath. So you do it in time to your steps and you build up to that. Wow. So you can do it in many, many different ways. There was something else you said that I wanted to touch on quickly. I can't remember what it is now. Go on.
Well, I mean, ultimately, you sort of mentioned earlier about your life and breath methodology, and
that was it.
Yeah, and sort of, you know, you can journal, you can bring all of the stuff that's in the subconscious up and out and heal and soothe and get to this sort of blissful state. But it sounds great. I mean, you're quite local to us. I feel like we'll meet again for sure. But for people listening, like, where can they find you, and do you do anything online that people can follow along with from home or anything like that?
Yeah. The best place to find me is on Instagram. So just Sam Adams Coach, come find me there, or on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn pretty much every day. Again, just Sam Adams Coach, you'll find me there. I run a regular class in Brighton on a Saturday morning at Humankind in Kemp Town. I run workshops and a class down at Lunar Wave at Madeira Drive, where I'll be today. And the workshops are really the thing. And I do a day called a Reset Day, which I hold at Florence House in Seaford. And they're really amazing days. So yeah, just come and find me on Instagram. There's links to all of my stuff there. I'm just about to start an online membership called Breath and Beyond. So you get, we have a monthly online session together. There's 2 online sessions a month. One is a breathwork session and one is a coaching session, because obviously I bring the 2 things together. So there'll be some online stuff, and I'm doing a free, I don't know when this is going out, but I'm doing a free morning breathwork practice to help people have a regular practice every morning at 7:30 for 6 days in a row, starting on February the 10th, and that's completely free. And just to help people to just start a little practice and, start the day right, as I think. So yeah.
Amazing.
Awesome, Sam. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
No, thanks for having me. I hope I haven't rambled on too much.
No, not at all. No, it's been fantastic. Thank you so
Amazing.
much.
Thank you.
No, I really appreciate the conversations.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Giles and
Thank you.
Sophie.